What would you put inside a gift box if you wanted your entire family to remember the day you finally told the truth? I grew up understanding exactly where I stood in my family long before anyone ever said it out loud. Nobody needs to say it directly. You just absorb it over years of small, quiet moments. The extra warmth in a parent's voice reserved for one child, the achievements that get celebrated versus the ones that get a passing nod before the conversation moves along. My sister Claire was always that celebrated one in our house, the daughter our parents seemed built to adore without effort. If Claire brought home a good grade, it went straight onto the fridge. If I brought home the same grade, I got a brief smile before the subject shifted back to her. I spent most of my childhood as background scenery in a story that always somehow circled back to Claire, no matter what I actually did. Even so, I never let that harden into real resentment toward her directly, since none of it was really her doing. I told myself, the way you do when you're still young enough to believe it, that things would eventually even out once we were both adults standing on our own. 2 nights ago proved exactly how wrong that belief was. My parents invited my husband, Ryan, and me over for dinner to celebrate Claire's pregnancy, something she and her husband Marcus had wanted for a long while. I went in genuinely happy for her, pushing past the low, familiar tightness in my stomach that shows up automatically. Whenever I'm around that house, a feeling so old at this point I barely register it consciously anymore. Ryan came with me, the way he had for 5 years, the one person I'd always counted on to make being around my family feel manageable. The dinner itself passed without any obvious incident. My parents fawned over Claire the way they always do, treating her pregnancy like some singular achievement no other woman had accomplished before her. I smiled through it, offered genuine congratulations, kept the evening pleasant. It was on my way back from the bathroom afterward that everything I thought I understood collapsed in about 30 seconds. Passing the kitchen, I caught my parents mid-conversation. Their voices dropped into that unmistakable register people use when they don't want to be overheard. I should have kept walking straight past like I would have on any other night. Instead, something in their tone made me stop cold in the hallway. My mother was saying quietly that they'd agreed never to bring up Claire's mistake around me. Confusion hit first, a half second of trying to place what mistake she could possibly mean, and then the actual meaning of her words landed like a physical blow. Claire had slept with Ryan, my husband, months earlier apparently, long enough ago that my parents referred to it almost casually between themselves at this point. They'd known the entire time and chosen silence instead of telling me, protecting Claire's image over telling her own daughter the truth, calling it a lapse in judgment that shouldn't be allowed to overshadow her now that she was finally pregnant. Barely remember how I actually got out of that house that night. Some mumbled excuse about not feeling well, my keys, the car, driving with no real destination, just needing distance from everything I'd just heard. My own parents had chosen her over me again, and this time the stakes weren't a curfew or a birthday gift. The stakes were my entire marriage. It felt like every quiet suspicion I'd carried since childhood had just been confirmed all at once, in one overheard sentence through a kitchen doorway. For 2 full days, I barely spoke to Ryan. He kept asking what was wrong, why I'd gone so cold and distant, and I genuinely couldn't answer him without picturing him with her, without my stomach turning over completely. I didn't know who deserved to hear from me first, whether it should be him demanding answers, my parents demanding accountability, or whether I even had the strength yet to face Claire directly. Somewhere around the 2-week mark, the initial shock finally burned off and something colder, far more deliberate, took its place. I decided against confronting any of them with tears or shouting, the reaction they were probably already prepared to manage and smooth over with a rehearsed family meeting. I wanted something undeniable and public instead, something none of them could quietly talk their way around later, so I went quiet. I let them keep believing I was still the same easy, compliant daughter who never made waves. While behind the scenes, I built a complete patient case against every one of them. People get careless once they think they've already gotten away with something. The baby shower ended up handing me exactly the platform I needed, almost as if it had been designed for it. My mother called days later, breezy and cheerful, completely unaware I now knew everything, asking if I'd organize the whole event for Claire, since apparently that's simply my role in this family whenever something needs handling. I agreed instantly, without a flicker of hesitation in my voice. A baby shower means a full room of witnesses, family, friends, in-laws, exactly the audience I needed. At night, once Ryan was asleep beside me, I went through his phone, his laptop, even old cloud, backups he'd clearly forgotten still existed. The first real discovery came in a folder tucked under some unremarkable, forgettable name, holding photo after photo of him and Claire together, clearly not a single isolated slip, but something ongoing. I kept digging over the following nights, and found actual message threads between the 2 of them, discussing exactly how careful they'd been to keep everything hidden from me specifically. Worse still were the messages between my mother and Claire, coordinating the cover-up directly, reassuring each other that protecting Claire's reputation mattered more than my right to the truth about my own marriage. I saved everything I found, backed it up twice, and waited patiently for the right moment. On the day of the shower, I played my part flawlessly from the moment I walked in. Supportive sister, dutiful daughter, the entire performance down to the smile fixed on my face. My mother ran the whole event like a coronation, blissfully unaware of what was quietly waiting in my bag the entire afternoon. I mingled with relatives, laughed at small talk that meant nothing to me, helped stack the growing pile of gifts on the table, all while carrying something considerably heavier than wrapping paper. When the cake was finally cut and every eye in the room turned toward Claire, I stood and told everyone I had something special for her, something that came straight from the heart. In a strange, twisted way, that part was actually true. The box itself was elaborate on purpose, built specifically to draw every eye in the room before she even lifted the lid. Expensive paper, an oversized bow, the whole presentation. Inside were printed photographs, chosen deliberately because they left absolutely no room for explanation or misinterpretation. I watched her expression shift in real time, delight collapsing into confusion, then into genuine horror as she processed exactly what she was holding in front of everyone she knew, before anyone in the room could fully process what they were. Seeing, I revealed decorative curtains I'd arranged earlier that day, displaying the same images enlarged, undeniable, laid out for the entire room at once. There was no version of this story my parents could quietly manage or spin anymore. No room left for whispered kitchen conversations. I laid it all out calmly. The affair itself, the deliberate cover-up, months of being lied to directly while I sat smiling across dinner tables with people who'd known everything the whole time. Marcus stormed out mid-sentence, calling her a traitor at the top of his voice, his tone carrying exactly the same raw shock I'd felt weeks earlier, standing frozen outside that kitchen doorway. My parents had absolutely nothing left to say, no defense left to offer for their favorite daughter this time, not with the evidence displayed for everyone present to see with their own eyes. Something in my chest finally loosened in that moment, something close to relief after weeks of carrying this alone, and I left the party without waiting around for a single apology from anyone. I heard the rest secondhand, from Claire's now former close friend who reached out to me days later, clearly still shaken by everything she'd witnessed. The party apparently descended into an outright brawl not long after I walked out. Marcus's parents unloaded on Claire with everything they had, furious and visibly disgusted, while my father tried weakly to shield her behind the fact of her pregnancy. Marcus's father wasn't interested in holding back, and things escalated quickly until my father actually charged at him and ended up flat on the ground after taking a single punch. Marcus's mother and my own mother got physically involved too, hair pulling included, until other guests finally managed to separate them. Claire herself walked away from the whole thing completely physically untouched, purely because of the pregnancy and nothing else. Ryan avoided getting hit entirely by making himself as invisible as possible in the crowd the whole time. I filed for divorce almost immediately afterward, and had every single one of his belongings waiting for him out on the front lawn before he even made it home that night. He didn't argue, didn't knock, didn't try to explain himself at the door. He simply collected his things in silence and left. Weeks passed without a single word of contact from my parents or Claire. No apology, no attempt to reach out to me specifically, which honestly confirmed everything I'd already suspected about where I truly stood with all of them. Even public humiliation on that scale, played out in front of their entire extended family, apparently wasn't enough to make any of them reconsider how they'd actually treated me over the years. Then the story kept unfolding entirely on its own, almost as if it had a life independent of anything I'd started. Claire's former friend discovered, through her own investigation, that her own husband had also been sleeping with Claire this whole time. When she confronted him about it directly, he reportedly went straight to Claire's place afterward, apparently believing at the time the baby might be his, and landed the exact punch Ryan had managed to dodge back at the shower. Ryan threatened to sue over it afterward, a detail I genuinely couldn't bring myself to care about at all. Marcus filed for divorce shortly after and moved out of their shared home entirely. My own divorce, meanwhile, closed out cleanly within about a month. No children involved, no drawn-out legal fight. Assets split evenly down the middle without much resistance from either side. Watching mine resolve so smoothly and quickly only made the ongoing mess surrounding Claire look considerably messier by comparison every time I heard another update. Ryan, after taking that punch and dealing with the growing suspicion that the baby might not even be his, eventually moved out of Claire's place entirely as well, apparently unable to stomach the possibility that she might have done to him exactly what the two of them had once done to me. When the baby finally arrived months later, the DNA test that followed confirmed Ryan wasn't the father after all. The child turned out to belong to the friend's husband instead, who was by that point also mid-divorce himself. Knowing Claire as well as I do, I honestly wouldn't be shocked if there were other candidates in the running who simply never got tested at all. At this point, the ongoing chaos surrounding her felt less like an active crisis and more like routine, expected behavior at this point. Still, to this day, nothing from my parents or from Claire directly. For a brief moment, I almost let myself give them the benefit of the doubt, assuming they were simply too buried under the consequences of their own choices to reach out. That wasn't sincere on my part, in case that needs clarifying for anyone reading this. I genuinely don't think they'd have reached out regardless of how much time passed. Eventually, Claire moved back in with our parents, alone now with the baby, since its actual biological father wanted no real part of either of them going forward. Marcus's divorce wrapped up entirely in his favor in the end. No house, no support payments, no lingering financial ties of any kind. The friend's divorce closed out around roughly the same time. The physical fighting has stopped completely by now. The legal loose ends have mostly tied themselves off on their own. But some things don't fully settle no matter how much time passes. Not the memory of that exact room the moment the truth finally came out in front of everyone. And, from what I still hear occasionally through the grapevine, not the mark still quietly visible on my father's pride, or the one Marcus's mother, apparently left permanently in my own mother's hairline that day. People sometimes ask if I regret how loud I made it, whether a quiet conversation somewhere private might have spared everyone the punch, the hair pulling, the months of fallout that followed. I've turned that question over more times than I can count, and I always land in the same place. A quiet conversation would have given them room to manage the story the way they always had, to soften it slowly into something forgivable over time, the same way they'd already softened Claire's affair into a mere lapse in judgment before I ever found out about any of it. I needed something they genuinely couldn't spin. I needed witnesses who couldn't be talked out of what they'd seen with their own eyes. What actually stayed with me longest wasn't the affair itself. Betrayal is, at least a familiar shape, something you can eventually name and grieve properly. What actually broke something in me was the casual, practiced ease with which my parents had decided my pain simply didn't factor into their equation at all. They weren't debating whether to tell me. They'd already decided, calmly, as settled fact, that protecting Claire's image outweighed my right to know the truth about my own life. That kind of quiet, decisive erasure is somehow harder to sit with than the affair on its own. I don't know if Claire and I will ever speak in any meaningful way again. Part of me assumes not, and I've mostly made peace with that possibility. What I do know is that I'm finished organizing my own worth around whether my parents ever notice me the way they notice her. That question used to run underneath everything I did growing up. Every grade, every quiet accomplishment, every small hope that maybe this time it would finally register. It doesn't run underneath anything anymore. Somewhere between that kitchen, doorway, and that gift box, I simply stopped waiting for it to.